We're making great progress. At this point, when our app loads, we have an initial message. And then when we click New Fortune, we get a new message. But if we click New Fortune again, we don't get a new fortune because, well, remember we set New Fortune to just index a certain point in our list. We set it to 6. So it's always giving us that fortune stored in index 6. One way we can get a random fortune is by creating a random number that we can plug in for our index point. We can use this thing that Android has called a random. So let's make a new random generator. We're going to call this random number generator. And this is going to be of the type random. And we're going to set that equal to new random. Make sure you have your open and closed parentheses and your semicolon. Now, in order to make the random number generator generate a new number, we say random number generator, because that's the name of our variable we made, dot next int. That means it's going to create a random integer. This little squiggly red line means that we need to put a semicolon there. So this will generate a new random number. So let's go ahead and store that random number in a variable called random number. Now remember, we need to tell Android what type this variable is. So since we're storing a random number or a random integer, we're going to call this type int. Now, we're not going to go into why this is so, but notice how int has a lowercase I that it starts with, and all the other types have a uppercase, right? String is uppercase, text view is uppercase. Just take that into consideration for now, that int is a lowercase int. And what is an int? An int is an integer, and an integer is just a whole number, right? Like 1, 2, or 20, or 1 million. An integer is not a decimal number or a fraction. Okay, so let's do a little test here. I want to see what kinds of random numbers it's actually generating. So what we can do is, instead of setting the text to fortune, let's set the text to our random number. I know from experience that Android Studio is going to complain that we're trying to set the text to an integer, and the set text method really wants a string. So I can force this to convert the integer to a string by doing this. Plus, and then 2 quotations. Since there's nothing in the quotations, it's not going to add anything. And this is going to kind of make Android Studio convert this to a string. Just a quick trick. Let's run this and see what kind of random numbers we're generating. Okay, so here's our startup message. And if I hit New Fortune, wow, that's a big number. 541,445,691. Whoa, another huge number. And that one's negative. Big. Okay, I can already see a problem. If you try to call an index on a list that's outside of how many index points there are, it's going to instantly crash your app, and Android Studio is going to yell at you, and you're going to get bugs, and it's just not going to be good. So we need to somehow only generate random numbers within the size of our list. So let's go back to our list for a minute. Let's look at the size of our list to see how many index points there are. Well, remember, it starts with 0. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we can't generate any random numbers above 7 and plug it into the index, because if we do, Android Studio is going to get real mad. So we need to somehow set the limit to only be from 0 to 7. Well, fortunately, there's a really easy way to do this. In our next int method here, if we type a number in here, that will be the limit of the numbers generated. So for instance, if we type 8, it will only generate integers, whole numbers, that are less than 8. So that will only give us random numbers of 0 through 7. Okay, let's run this again and see if that actually works. We'll click on our button. Cool. As you can see up here, we're only now getting integers that are 0 through 7. Awesome. Now we just plug that into our index and we can get whatever fortune is stored at that point in our list. So back in our onNewFortune method, let's plug in, instead of fortunes.get at index 6, let's do fortunes.get at the index random number. And then we'll set our fortune field back to fortune. Let's run the app and see if it works. Okay, the moment of truth. That's a new fortune. Not a new fortune. There we go. There's another one. There's a random one. And there's a random one. Great. Our app's working now. We're getting random fortunes every time that we click new fortune. Now, sometimes you might notice that the random number generated happens to be the same one that we just had. We'll add some code in a little bit in order to make sure it's always a new fortune. But for now, this is pretty close to what we want.